you mentioned there that the doubling of the polyunsaturated fats has likely contributed to, I believe, the reduction in cardiovascular disease mortality. And you can look at a curve. You can look at as the cardiovascular disease mortality has gone down, plant oil consumption has gone up. But yet there are some people who are set on pointing the finger at vegetable oils and seed oils and canola oil, for example, and saying that these are actually harmful, they're inflammatory, they contribute to disease, and that typically is really directed at omega-6 linolenic acid. And I'm sure that's something that you've seen. Why do you think that idea exists?
That's a good question. I've been asking colleagues, where does this idea come about that seed oils and omega-6 are harmful? And I think the person really who was pushing that for quite a while was Artemis Simopoulos, whose work you may have come across. But actually, she really didn't do any work. I read her papers, and there's no evidence, there's no research that she's done on this. The idea, I think, comes from the fact that we eat our main omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids in a diet are 18 carbons long, and those fatty acids, omega-6 and omega-3, are elongated and desaturated and become inflammatory or anti-inflammatory factors. And the idea is that omega-6s compete against the elongation and desaturation of omega-3 fatty acids. And it's believed, and there's evidence that omega-3 fatty acids have anti-inflammatory effects. And so there must be competition there, and if omega-3s are good, omega-6s must be bad. I think that's the extent of the information, or the hypothesis here. But this ignores the fact, several facts, that omega-3 fatty acid levels are elongated to arachidonic acid, and the body really wants that because it's been staring me in the face for decades, but the amount of arachidonic acid in the blood as a percent of fatty acids is about 20 times higher than the amount in our diet. So our body really wants to have a lot of arachidonic acid, and and regulates that very tightly. So these are not unregulated pathways, and arachidonic acid is really important. It's a very major part of our central nervous system, and involved in inflammatory pathways that fight infections, for example. So these are tightly regulated pathways. They're not just allowed to compete directly with each other. But more importantly, that polyunsaturated, omega-6 polyunsaturates have many other functions as well, that they downregulate NF-kappa B, which is an inflammatory pathway, and they also are a ligand for PPAR gamma, which is an insulin sensitizer as well. So it's pretty clear that replacing saturated fat with polyunsaturated fat reduces insulin resistance and diabetes risk as well. So I think there's a mistake just to look at the human biochemistry and biology is really complicated, and to look just at one pathway and sort of on this hypothetical reason make dietary recommendations. I think that's where it's coming from. But there are now dozens of studies that show that omega-6 fatty acids are not pro-inflammatory. They're, in a number of the studies, they're actually anti-inflammatory. So we need both omega-6 and omega-3. They're both essential. And if we only had omega-6 polyunsaturates, that wouldn't be a good situation either. We need both of them. And the exact balance is not totally clear, but we have up to about 8% polyunsaturates, omega-6 in our diet. Taiwan is about, when I looked, about the highest at about 15%. So we've looked, we can't, at some point, almost everything will start to become bad or too much, but we don't see that within our population.
Yeah, I think it's become a bit of a scapegoat almost. I've seen some people point to ultra-processed foods and say it's the linolenic acid. That's the one thing that is obesogenic. But even if you look at the research on obesity, and I saw a really interesting paper in Circulation, I'll put this on screen as well, that did a biochemical analysis, and they actually looked at linolenic acid in serum and in adipose tissue. You've probably seen this. You might even be an author on this paper. I'm not sure. But they saw an inverse relationship. So the higher the linolenic acid adipose tissue levels, the lower total mortality.
Yeah, and lower diabetes, lower cardiovascular risk to all. And we've also looked at weight gain too, that there was actually less weight gain with higher linolenic acid intake. But you're right, it's amazing how these myths develop and get propagated on the internet.